An evil police officer slaps an elderly black woman, only to be stunned when he realizes she is his new superior. What unfolds next is a powerful journey of accountability, transformation, and a life-altering lesson he never expected. How will this officer confront his formidable new leader, and what shocking twist awaits him by the end of this story? Tune in to find out. Before diving in, let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel to hear more inspiring and impactful stories like this one. Morning sunlight streamed through the tall glass windows of the Greenview Police Department, painting the ivory white walls with a golden glow and illuminating the bustling energy of a new work day. Phones rang, keyboards clattered, and officers moved back and forth with coffee cups in hand. Everything hummed to the rhythm of familiar chaos. But today, the atmosphere felt unusually tense, especially when Jackson Carter, an ambitious young officer known for his biases, strode into the precinct. Jackson had just returned from a grueling overnight shift in the city's East End, a place where crime and violence never seemed to rest. He had narrowly managed to control a dangerous burglary incident, and exhaustion was etched into his angular features. Yet, his sharp eyes glimmered with the pride of someone convinced they knew right from wrong with unwavering clarity. As he entered the main lobby, his gaze fell on an elderly woman standing by the reception desk. Olivia Matthews, with her salt and pepper curls and simple outfit, a navy blue blouse and comfortable slacks, was chatting amicably with another officer. A faint smile played on her lips, and her eyes exuded a serene calm. But to Jackson, her presence triggered a cascade of prejudiced thoughts. "Probably just a local here to complain," Jackson muttered to himself, striding toward the desk. He was used to dealing with situations like this. People who, in his eyes, wasted police resources with trivial grievances or incessant complaints. To him, people like Olivia symbolize inconvenience and time wasting. Jackson stopped directly in front of Olivia, his voice cold and authoritative as he spoke. "Ma'am, this is a police station, not a place to loiter. If you have important business, speak to the receptionist. Otherwise, I need you to leave immediately." His words seemed to hang in the air, silencing the background noise. Nearby officers, while pretending not to notice, couldn't help but glance in curiosity. Olivia turned to face Jackson, surprise flickering briefly across her features. Yet, instead of showing anger, she responded with a calm smile. "Do you think I'm being a nuisance?" she asked, her voice steady but sharp. Jackson, emboldened by his perceived authority, pressed on. "Yes. If you have no legitimate reason to be here, I will have to ask you to leave immediately." Before Olivia could respond, Jackson, growing irritated by what he saw as defiance, took a step closer. Gesturing toward the door, he lightly tapped her shoulder as a warning. "I don't want to have to repeat myself." The room grew tense. Several officers paused mid-step, their expressions a mixture of shock and disbelief. Olivia stood her ground, her serene demeanor unwavering. But this time, the light in her eyes was sharper, as though she were assessing the man before her. "Officer Carter!" A commanding voice rang out from behind. Jackson turned to see Captain Richardson, a seasoned and authoritative figure, approaching with a stern expression. "What are you doing?" Richardson demanded, his voice icy. "Sir," Jackson began, gesturing toward Olivia, "this woman—" "Stop," Richardson interrupted, glancing briefly at Olivia. His eyes softened, though his demeanor remained firm. "Officer Carter, do you know who this is?" Jackson frowned, annoyance bubbling up inside him. "No, sir, but I'm certain she has no—" "She is Captain Olivia Matthews." Richardson declared, his gaze sharp as he stared Jackson down. "Your new superior officer, effective today." The announcement landed like a bombshell. Jackson felt his entire body freeze as he processed the words. He turned back to Olivia, who remained poised and composed, her expression now tinged with faint amusement, as if she were curious about his reaction. "My superior?" Jackson repeated, his voice faltering as disbelief set in. "Yes," Richardson confirmed. "You can explain your conduct to Captain Matthews. I'm sure she'll appreciate your honesty." Olivia stepped forward, meeting Jackson's stunned gaze. Her calm demeanor never wavered, but her tone carried an unmistakable edge of authority. "We'll have an interesting conversation later," she said, her voice low and deliberate, as though issuing a warning without raising it. Jackson felt a dry lump in his throat. He could sense the eyes of his colleagues fixed on him, and the weight of their unspoken judgments only deepened his regret. In that moment, he realized he had made an irreversible mistake, and the repercussions were just beginning. The conference room door shut behind Jackson Carter with a heavy click, trapping him in a space that felt far smaller than it was. The room wasn't large, but Captain Olivia Matthews's commanding presence made it feel even tighter. She sat at the head of the table, her back straight, hands resting calmly on the table, yet radiating an undeniable aura of authority. Jackson sank into the chair across from her, his hands clasped tightly on his knees. He tried to maintain a neutral expression, but inside a storm raged. His hands still trembled slightly from the encounter in the lobby, and he now understood that the situation was far graver than he had imagined. "Do you know why you're here?" Olivia asked, her voice even but sharp as a blade. She didn't look at Jackson immediately, but instead focused on a file in front of her, as though each line written in it was a record of his failures. "Captain Matthews," Jackson began, forcing his voice to stay steady, "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I didn't mean—" Olivia's eyes snapped up, cutting him off mid-sentence. Her gaze was icy, unrelenting. "A misunderstanding? You think assaulting someone in front of your colleagues, especially a superior, can be brushed off as a misunderstanding, Officer Carter?" Jackson fell silent, unprepared for her directness. The weight of her words pressed down on him, but he clung to his pride, unwilling to concede so quickly. "Let me make this clear," Olivia continued, her tone dropping an octave, her words deliberate. "Your actions weren't just unprofessional. They were a blatant display of disrespect and prejudice. I've been in this line of work long enough to recognize officers like you from the moment you open your mouth. So, Carter, what exactly were you doing? Judging me because I wasn't in uniform? Or was it because I'm an older black woman?" Her words hit Jackson like a slap. He wanted to argue, to defend himself, but the truth loomed large, undeniable. His actions had been driven by ingrained biases, and now he was paying the price. "Captain," Jackson finally said, his voice quieter now, "I didn't intend—" "Didn't intend?" Olivia interrupted again, leaning forward slightly, her gaze drilling into his. "You're a police officer, Carter. What is your job? To protect and serve. But instead, you chose judgment, prejudice, and even violence. What do you think that says about you as an officer?" Jackson lowered his head, her words weighing heavily on him. Olivia exhaled, leaning back in her chair. The room fell silent, the tension thick. After a few moments, she spoke again, her tone slow and precise, as though carefully crafting each word. "You have two choices," she said, her voice leaving no room for negotiation. "First, you can write your resignation letter right now. I'll sign it and make sure your file includes every necessary detail so other departments know exactly why you're not fit for this job. Jackson's head shot up, his eyes wide with shock and panic. Resign? He couldn't fathom the idea of throwing away the career he had poured so much into over a moment of misjudgment. And the second option? He asked, his voice dry and strained. Olivia arched a brow, sitting upright as she clasped her hands together on the table. The second option is that you transfer to Lincoln Heights. The room seemed to grow colder. Just the mention of Lincoln Heights made Jackson's stomach churn. He had heard the stories, countless tales from fellow officers about the area's rampant crime, poverty, and violence. It wasn't just a challenging assignment, it was a trial by fire. Lincoln Heights? Jackson scoffed bitterly, his tone laced with defiance. What do you expect me to do there? Get myself killed trying to protect people who don't even want us there? Olivia didn't flinch at his tone. She leaned forward, her gaze unwavering and razor-sharp. You'll go there to learn how to work with a community you don't understand, to learn to see people beyond your biases. And if you can't do that, then you have no place in this profession. Anger flared within Jackson, but he knew better than to let it show. He took a deep breath, fighting to maintain his composure. And if I refuse both options? Olivia shrugged, a faint, humorless smile playing on her lips. That's not an option, Carter. You've put yourself in this position, and now you'll face the consequences. The room fell silent once more. Jackson sat frozen, feeling as though the weight of the world had just been placed on his shoulders. He had no real choice. Resignation meant abandoning not just his career, but the identity he had built around it. But going to Lincoln Heights? That felt like exile. He swallowed hard, his voice barely audible. I'll go to Lincoln Heights. Olivia nodded, as though the decision had been inevitable. She stood, her posture commanding respect as she prepared to leave. Wise choice, she said, her tone calm but firm. But remember this, Carter. This is your last chance. Don't waste it. Jackson left the room, a heavy weight pressing firmly on his chest. He knew he was stepping into a challenge that would test not only his career, but also the very core of his character. Yet within him, a storm continued to brew, a storm of resentment and anger swirling just beneath the surface. The following morning, Jackson set off for Lincoln Heights. The old police cruiser rolled slowly down Lincoln Heights' main street, its engine's rumble blending into the oppressive summer morning heat. Jackson Carter sat in the passenger seat, his eyes darting to the scenery outside as he observed the new area where he was assigned to work. What unfolded before him was a vibrant yet contradictory tableau. Small shops with hand-painted signs, children playing jump rope on dusty sidewalks, and makeshift homes packed closely together, their paint long since peeled away. "This is Lincoln Heights," said Marcus Reed, Jackson's new partner, as they turned onto a narrower street. "Not quite like where you're used to, huh?" Jackson didn't reply, shrugging instead as he tried to maintain a detached expression. Yet within him, a simmering disdain crept through as he took in the cluttered streets and the residents, whose glances were a mix of friendliness and cautious scrutiny as the police car drove by. "You'll get used to it," Marcus said, his eyes fixed on the road. "Lincoln Heights has its challenges, but it's a real community. They'll welcome you, as long as you're willing to open up." Jackson gave a dry chuckle. "Open up?" he echoed with a hint of mockery. "I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to do my job." Marcus glanced at him briefly, his expression calm and measured. "You'll learn soon enough that around here, doing your job means more than keeping order. It's about building trust." The car came to a halt in front of a small cafe with a hand-painted wooden sign that read, "Sweet Grace Cafe." Jackson scanned the street, his eyes skimming over the pedestrians, some of whom paused their conversations to glance cautiously at the police car. Their gazes didn't carry fear, but rather a guarded wariness, an atmosphere Jackson wasn't accustomed to. "Let's go," Marcus said, opening the car door. "You need to meet someone." Inside the cafe, the atmosphere was warm and welcoming, filled with the rich aroma of coffee and freshly baked bread. In a corner, an older woman with neatly styled silver hair sat engrossed in a small notebook. She wore a simple floral dress, but her demeanor exuded the quiet authority of someone who commanded respect. "Evelyn," Marcus called, approaching her table. "This is Jackson Carter, my new partner." Evelyn looked up, a warm smile spreading across her face as she stood. "Welcome, Officer Carter," she said, extending her hand. Jackson shook her hand, but couldn't hide the cool indifference in his expression. "Hello," he said curtly. "You must be new," Evelyn remarked, her tone gentle but sharp. "Lincoln Heights may not look like other places, but this is a wonderful community. I'm sure you'll come to see that in time." Jackson smirked slightly, making no effort to hide his skepticism. He turned toward Marcus, silently hoping this introduction would be over soon. But Evelyn wasn't finished. "We're hosting a community gathering at the center this weekend," she continued. "It's a great opportunity for new officers to meet the residents. I hope you'll join us." Jackson shook his head almost immediately. "Thanks for the invitation, but I don't think I'll have time," he said stiffly. "There's plenty of work to do." Evelyn studied him for a moment, her gaze briefly reflecting disappointment before her smile returned. "That's fair," she replied calmly. "But remember, to protect a community, you need to understand it first." As they left the cafe, Marcus glanced sideways at Jackson, his expression patient yet knowing. "You don't want to go?" he asked. "No," Jackson said, not bothering to look at Marcus. "I'm here to work, not socialize." Marcus smirked. "You might think that, but if you want to survive here, you'll need to learn to listen. And sometimes listening starts with showing up to things like that." Jackson didn't respond. His gaze fixed out the car window as the streets of Lincoln Heights passed by. No matter where he looked, he felt like an outsider, disconnected from everything around him. That afternoon, Marcus took Jackson through smaller streets, where life revealed itself in vibrant but challenging ways. Old, crowded houses with small vegetable gardens in their front yards stood alongside modest shops selling everything from groceries to household goods. Despite the outward chaos, a rhythm of life pulsed through the neighborhood. Children's laughter echoed in the streets, lively conversations filled the sidewalks, and warm greetings were exchanged with Marcus from the locals. "Hey, Officer Reed," a middle-aged man called from a vegetable stand. "Doing your rounds again?" Marcus laughed heartily. "Just showing the new guy around, Mr. Johnson. This is Officer Carter, my new partner." Mr. Johnson gave Jackson a nod, though his eyes held a hint of scrutiny. Jackson returned the gesture with a quick, detached nod, his discomfort evident. "So, Carter," Marcus said as they moved on, "what do you think of Lincoln Heights?" Jackson shrugged, his gaze dropping to the cracked pavement. "Messy, chaotic." Marcus chuckled, unsurprised by the response. "Yeah, it's not perfect. But if you take the time to look closer, you'll find there's a lot more here than meets the eye." But Jackson wasn't interested. As he walked further, the weight in his chest grew heavier with the realization that everything in Lincoln Heights, the people, the streets, the way of life, was utterly foreign to him. And no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't shake the feeling that he didn't belong. The sun hung high in the sky, casting harsh rays over the cramped streets of Lincoln Heights. The police cruiser carrying Jackson Carter and Marcus Reed crept slowly through the bustling central area. Jackson stared out of the window with his usual detached expression, uninterested in the scenes unfolding outside. Marcus, on the other hand, scanned the streets intently, his eyes seeming to search for something familiar. Suddenly, a piercing scream shattered the air, followed by the sharp sound of breaking glass and hurried footsteps. Jackson shot upright, his hand instinctively reaching for his holster. Without needing an explanation, Marcus turned the car sharply down a nearby alley, heading toward a small park where a crowd had gathered. As the two officers exited the vehicle, the scene before them was utter chaos. Two groups of teenagers faced off, their faces flushed with anger. One group, numbering 7 and consisting mostly of young men, or 4 individuals, looked scruffier but no less defiant. Surrounding them were residents, their expressions a mix of curiosity and concern. "Coward! How dare you take my stuff without asking?" shouted a tall young man, pointing an accusing finger at someone in the opposing group. The accused, appearing about 18 years old, stared at the ground, fists clenched as if ready to retaliate. "Disperse immediately!" Jackson barked, stepping directly between the two groups. His voice rang out loudly. "All of you, step back. Anyone who stays will be arrested immediately." For a brief moment, silence hung in the air. But rather than comply, the teenagers from both sides turned their challenging gazes toward Jackson. One of the larger group's members, clearly their leader, stepped forward with a mocking grin. "Who do you think you are? This isn't your turf." Jackson stiffened, his face flushing with anger. "I'm a police officer, and this is my job. Step back now, or you'll be in handcuffs." But instead of obeying, murmurs rippled through the crowd. A few teens tightened their grips on their makeshift weapons, and some raised sticks in warning. The atmosphere grew tense, like a volcano on the verge of eruption. "Jackson, hold on." Marcus stepped forward, gently pulling Jackson back, his calm but firm gaze meeting Jackson's fiery one. "Let me handle this." "You handle it?" Jackson snapped. "They're about to start a fight. Do you think talking will solve this?" Marcus didn't reply immediately. He simply nodded and stepped slowly toward the teenagers, his palms raised in a gesture of peace. His voice, steady and clear, broke through the thick tension in the air. "Listen, guys. I understand you're angry," Marcus began, his eyes moving between the two groups. "But fighting here won't solve anything. It'll only make things worse." One boy, holding a broken bottle, yelled, "He took my stuff. I have to teach him a lesson." "I get it." Marcus nodded slowly. "If someone took your belongings, we'll handle it. But if you use that bottle, you'll hurt someone. Or yourself. Is that what you want?" Marcus's words weren't just an attempt to stop the violence. They carried a genuine tone, like advice from someone who had been there before. The tension between the two groups began to ease. A few of the larger group's members stepped back, their expressions wavering. Marcus continued, his voice soft but authoritative. "I'm not here to arrest anyone. I'm here to help. But you have to help yourselves first. Put the bottle down, and we'll talk." The boy with the bottle hesitated for a moment, then slowly lowered it to the ground. Marcus bent down to pick it up, his expression encouraging. "Good. Now, let's work together to figure this out." Over the next 10 minutes, Marcus skillfully separated the two groups and spoke with them individually to uncover the cause of the conflict. It turned out to be a misunderstanding. A bicycle suspected of being stolen belonged to a friend in the smaller group who had borrowed it without informing anyone. As the situation resolved, Marcus walked back to Jackson, a faint smile on his face. "All done," he said. "No one got hurt, no one got arrested. Sometimes all it takes is listening to make things easier. Jackson stood still, his eyes scanning the crowd as it began to disperse. A strange feeling crept into his chest, a mix of surprise and frustration. He couldn't understand how Marcus had managed to diffuse the situation so calmly and effectively without resorting to force. "That's it?" Jackson asked, his voice tinged with sarcasm to mask his unease. "You think a few words can fix everything?" Marcus turned to face him, his gaze patient yet firm. "Sometimes, Jackson, words are stronger than actions. You'll figure that out if you're willing to see things differently." Jackson didn't reply, walking back to the car with a look of lingering irritation. But deep down, a faint thought began to form. Could Marcus's approach be more than just words? Had he been wrong to think that power and enforcement were the only ways to maintain order? The setting sun casts a warm amber glow over the streets of Lincoln Heights, giving the bustling area of the day an unexpectedly serene atmosphere. After a tense day, Jackson Carter decided to take a walk to clear his mind. He needed space to reflect on the things Marcus had said and how Marcus had handled the confrontation earlier that morning. As Jackson walked past the main corner of the neighborhood, a soft sound began to emerge from the distance. It was the sound of a guitar. Initially, Jackson planned to walk past, but the melody seeped into his thoughts, drawing him toward its source. He saw an older man sitting on a worn wooden chair on the street corner. The man wore a faded button-down shirt and frayed jeans, but his face was alight with a gentle smile. In front of him lay an open guitar case with only a few loose coins scattered inside. The music from the man's guitar wasn't complex, but it carried a warmth that felt as if each note was pulled from his soul. Passers-by slowed their steps, some stopping to listen, while others leaned down to drop coins into the case. A few children sat cross-legged on the curb, mesmerized by the man's deft fingers as they moved across the strings. Jackson observed the scene from a distance, his expression stern but intrigued. There was something about this man that Jackson couldn't quite ignore. He slowed his steps, focusing intently on the melody. When the song ended, the man looked up and met Jackson's gaze, offering a warm smile. "Good evening, officer," he said, his voice deep and friendly. Jackson hesitated. "How do you know I'm a cop?" he asked, his tone neutral but curious. "Nothing gets past me in Lincoln Heights," the man replied, his smile unwavering. "I'm Tommy Jenkins. Nice to meet you." Jackson nodded, stepping closer. "I heard you playing from down the street. Not bad." Tommy chuckled, picking up his guitar. "Thanks, but I just play what I feel. Music isn't about being perfect. It's about touching the heart." Jackson sat down on a nearby step, crossing his arms over his chest. "Do you play here often?" "Almost every day," Tommy said, adjusting the strings on his guitar. "This is my corner. I sit here, play a few songs, and talk to whoever stops by. Sometimes people just need a little music to ease their minds." Jackson stayed quiet, observing Tommy. The man's appearance didn't suggest wealth or success, but there was an inexplicable calm and wisdom in his eyes and voice. "How do you live?" Jackson asked, a hint of skepticism in his tone. "You survive on just these coins?" Tommy shrugged, his smile gentle. "I don't need much. As long as I've got enough to eat and a guitar to play, life takes care of the rest." Jackson frowned slightly, struggling to understand the simplicity of this lifestyle. "Doesn't it get tiring? Lincoln Heights isn't an easy place to live." Tommy set his guitar down, his eyes gazing into the distance. "You know, Jackson, there was a time when I lived in anger and despair, but I realized those feelings didn't bring anything but pain. So I chose to find joy in the little things. Music helps me do that." Picking up the guitar again, Tommy strummed a few soft chords before easing into a new melody. The tune was slow and melancholic, yet it carried a faint trace of hope. The surrounding street seemed to pause as if the music had stilled time itself. Passers-by stopped to listen, some smiling softly, others closing their eyes as if absorbing every note. Jackson sat in silence, listening. He wasn't used to moments like this, so quiet, so profound. But he couldn't deny the way Tommy's music resonated with something deep inside him. It was as if the melody was brushing against corners of his soul he'd long ignored. When the song ended, Tommy looked directly at Jackson, his eyes warm yet penetrating. "Music is the language of the heart," he said. "It doesn't need explanation. It just needs to be heard." Jackson stood, his expression still stern, but there was a subtle shift in his demeanor. "Thanks for the song," he said, his voice lower, less guarded than before. Tommy smiled. "You're always welcome here, Officer Carter, anytime you want to hear more." Jackson turned and walked away without another word. But as he left the corner, Tommy's melody lingered in his mind, a quiet reminder that there were things worth seeing, not just with his eyes, but with his heart. That evening, after leaving the street corner where Tommy Jenkins played his guitar, Jackson Carter returned to his small apartment. The melodies Tommy had played lingered in Jackson's mind like an endless refrain. He tried to brush them aside, but Tommy's optimism and inexplicable calmness unsettled him. Sitting at his desk, Jackson's gaze fell on an old family photograph encased in a small frame. In it, his father, David Carter, stood proudly in his police uniform, smiling as he posed with a young Jackson. Beneath the photo, the engraved words seemed to echo in Jackson's mind. "Justice is not just judgment, it's understanding." Jackson sighed, picking up the picture. Memories of his father's death surged back, killed in the line of duty in an unsolved case from 20 years ago. The old wounds ached anew, and Jackson made a decision he had avoided for years. Under the dim light of a hanging bulb, Jackson stepped into the station's records archive. Rows of old metal cabinets stood stacked together, cloaked in layers of dust. The room was eerily quiet, except for the occasional flicker of fluorescent lights, which only added to the tension. He opened the cabinet containing old case files and began searching for those related to his father. Each file he flipped through brought a pang of pain, but he pressed on. When his eyes landed on the folder marked "Case File David Carter," his heart sank. Jackson pulled the file out, placed it on the desk, and switched on the desk lamp. Photographs of the crime scene, witness statements, and investigation reports spread out before him. As he scanned each page, his breathing grew heavier, and the pieces of the story began to fall into place. One name froze him in his tracks: Tommy Jenkins. "No, it can't be," Jackson whispered, his breath quickening. Reading further, the chilling truth unraveled before his eyes. Tommy Jenkins had been the man who accidentally killed his father during a robbery 20 years ago. The report detailed that Tommy, desperate to get money for his daughter's medical treatment, had struggled with David Carter, who was trying to stop the robbery. In the chaos, the gun had gone off. Jackson gripped the file tightly, his knuckles white with tension. His mind raced as the image of Tommy smiling and playing his guitar clashed with the brutal reality in front of him. "He's been living free, while my father," Jackson muttered, his voice choked with anger. The next morning, Jackson marched straight to the street corner where Tommy often performed. His steps were heavy, his anger bubbling with every stride. From a distance, he saw Tommy, strumming his guitar with his usual gentle demeanor, the music as soothing as ever. But this time, the melodies only fueled Jackson's sense of betrayal. "Tommy Jenkins!" Jackson shouted, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. Tommy stopped playing and looked up, surprised. A few passers-by paused, curious about the commotion. "What's the matter, Jackson?" Tommy asked, his brows furrowing as he noticed Jackson's tense expression. Jackson stormed forward, throwing the case file to the ground in front of Tommy. "Do you know what this is? It's the truth about my father, David Carter, the man you killed 20 years ago." Tommy's face turned pale, his eyes widening in shock. His hands trembled as he looked from the file to Jackson. You know?" "Yes, I know," Jackson yelled. "You've been living peacefully while my father's been in the ground for 2 decades. What do you have to say for yourself, Tommy? Do you think I'll forgive you?" Tommy lowered his head, his hands shaking as they gripped the guitar. After a moment, he looked up, his eyes glistening with tears. "Please, let me explain, Jackson." "Explain?" Jackson spat, his voice dripping with venom. "What could you possibly say? That it was an accident? That you didn't mean to? Will that bring my father back?" Tommy sighed deeply, his voice cracking with emotion. "Yes, I killed your father, but I didn't want to. I was desperate, Jackson. My daughter, Lily, was only 6 years old. She needed medicine to survive, and I didn't have the money. I did something foolish. I tried to rob a convenience store, and your father was there, off duty." Tommy paused, his voice trembling. "Your father didn't yell or try to wrestle the gun from me. He just said he understood. But I panicked, and the gun, it went off." "Shut up," Jackson barked, his fists clenched tightly. "Do you think your excuses will erase what you've done?" Tommy didn't flinch. He bowed his head, his voice heavy with guilt. "I don't expect you to forgive me, Jackson. I haven't forgiven myself. I've lived with this guilt every day for 20 years. I don't deserve peace, and I don't ask for it." Jackson stared at Tommy, his eyes filled with a storm of rage and confusion. Part of him burned with the desire to lunge at the man in front of him, to exact vengeance for his father. Yet another part, a smaller but unmistakable voice within, kept him rooted in place, as though held back by something unnamed and unexplainable. Passers-by began to gather, their curious gazes shifting between Jackson and Tommy. Some discreetly pulled out their phones, recording the intense and raw confrontation. Tommy stood motionless, his old frame bent with the weight of guilt, his expression one of quiet acceptance. He didn't flinch, waiting for Jackson's explosion, his fate in the younger man's hands. But Jackson said nothing more. Without another word, he turned abruptly, striding away quickly, as though fleeing the chaos of emotions threatening to consume him. The truth was too much, too overwhelming, and he had no idea what to do with it. That evening, Jackson Carter sat motionless in his small apartment. Faint street lights cast a weak glow through the windows, throwing shadows across the bare walls. But Jackson paid no attention. The file about his father lay open on the table, its contents scattered. Black and white photos scrawled notes on old, yellowed paper. All seemed to scream the truths he didn't want to believe. His gaze landed on a photograph. His father, David Carter, in his police uniform, beaming with pride as he held a young Jackson in his arms. The sight tightened something in Jackson's chest. "You should have been here," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "You should have lived to see me grow up." The sound of the door opening startled him. Emily, Jackson's girlfriend, stepped in, carrying a light breeze from outside. One look at him and she instantly knew something was wrong. He sat there, his face void of life, his eyes empty and filled with despair. "Jackson, what's going on?" Emily asked, walking closer to him. He didn't respond. She sat beside him, worry etched into her face as she searched his. "You're scaring me. Please, tell me what's happened." Jackson stayed silent, reaching for the file. He pulled out a page and handed it to her. It was Tommy Jenkins' confession, the statement detailing how he had accidentally killed Jackson's father during a robbery. Emily took the paper, her hands trembling slightly as she read it. Her eyes widened as the truth unfolded before her. "Oh my God," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. "Tommy, it's him?" Jackson nodded, his eyes ablaze with a mix of anger and pain. "He killed my father, Emily. For 20 years he's lived peacefully, while my mom cried herself to sleep and I grew up without a dad. I talked to him, laughed with him, and had no idea about the monster he was." Emily sat quietly, unable to find the right words. After a moment, she gently placed the paper back on the table and turned to Jackson. "What are you going to do?" Jackson rose, walking to the window and staring out at the faint glow of streetlights. "I don't know. Part of me wants to go to him right now and make him pay for what he's done. But what?" Emily asked, her voice soft yet unwavering. "But I'm not sure." Jackson's voice faltered. "I'm not sure it'll make me feel any better. My dad always said justice isn't about revenge. But how am I supposed to forgive someone who took my father away, Emily? How am I supposed to do that?" Emily studied him, her gaze gentle but firm. "Do you remember what your dad used to say about what justice means?" Her words pulled Jackson back into a memory. He could recall the moments, the lessons his father had instilled in him. Justice isn't about punishment. It's about helping, David Carter had once said, sitting beside Jackson on their worn living room sofa. It was a phrase he repeated often when discussing his work. "But what if they're bad people, Dad?" a younger Jackson had asked, his curious eyes wide. "No one is born bad, son," David had replied, placing his large hand on Jackson's small shoulder. "Everyone has reasons for what they do. If we only focus on punishing and not understanding, then we're no better than those who do wrong." Jackson remembered another moment when his father had caught a young boy shoplifting at a grocery store. Instead of arresting him, David had arranged for the boy to work at the store to repay what he had taken. "Sometimes a second chance can change a life," David had said that night. The memories brought a lump to Jackson's throat. He turned to Emily, his eyes clouded with emotion. "I don't know if I can be like my dad, Emily. I don't know if I'm strong enough to forgive." Emily stood and walked to him, placing her hand gently on his shoulder. "Jackson, forgiveness isn't for Tommy, it's for you. If you hold on to this anger, it'll consume you. But if you forgive, you'll find the peace your dad always talked about." Jackson lowered his head, his hands clenching into fists. "I'm afraid that forgiving him would betray my dad's memory." Emily shook her head, her voice soft but firm. "You're not betraying anyone. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means freeing yourself from a burden you don't need to carry." Jackson stood in silence for a long moment, her words echoing in his mind as he wrestled with the storm of emotions inside. Finally, his gaze fell on the photo of his father on the table. David Carter's smiling face, filled with love and wisdom, seemed to be urging him toward a decision. "I don't know if I can do it," Jackson admitted, his voice shaky, "but I think my dad would want me to try." Emily smiled gently, taking his hand in hers. "I believe you'll find the right path, Jackson. You're stronger than you think." Jackson looked into her eyes, then back at the photograph of his father. "I need more time," he said, his tone steadier but still uncertain. "But I think I'll try." Emily nodded. That's all your dad would ask of you. Just try, Jackson." That morning, the soft sunlight of Lincoln Heights streamed through the window of Jackson Carter's apartment. Sitting at his desk, he stared at the photograph of his father, David Carter, nestled amidst the disarray of scattered files. Emily's words and his father's teachings echoed in his mind. After a sleepless night of contemplation, Jackson exhaled deeply, clenching his fists. He reminded himself, "This isn't just about him, it's about me. Forgiveness won't bring my father back, but it might bring the peace he always wanted for me." That afternoon, Jackson returned to the familiar street corner where Tommy Jenkins often played guitar. The gentle melody floated through the quiet air, blending with the lively sounds of the neighborhood. But this time, Jackson wasn't just another passerby. He approached with purposeful steps, each one weighted with determination. Tommy looked up, his face betraying a flicker of worry as he recognized Jackson. "You're back." His voice trembled as if dreading the words Jackson might speak next. "We need to talk," Jackson said, his gaze steady and calm, no longer ignited by the searing anger from before. He gestured for Tommy to sit on a nearby bench. After a long moment of silence, Jackson finally spoke, his voice subdued. "I've thought a lot, and I realize that my anger does nothing. It doesn't bring my father back, and it doesn't hurt you more than you've already hurt yourself." Tommy lowered his head, his eyes reflecting deep remorse. "You have every right to hate me, Jackson. I destroyed your family. Not a day goes by that I don't think about it." Jackson took a deep breath, locking eyes with Tommy. "I've thought about making you pay, but I realized that would betray everything my father taught me. He believed in forgiveness and creating something better for the world." Tommy's eyes filled with tears as he looked up. "You're forgiving me?" Jackson nodded slowly. "Not because you deserve it, but because it's the right thing to do. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means freeing myself from the chains of hatred." A heavy silence hung between them. Tommy hesitated before speaking. Then, "Is there anything I can do to make amends? I'll do whatever it takes." Jackson offered a faint smile. "You once told me that music can bring people together, didn't you? Let's use music to change Lincoln Heights." Tommy looked surprised. "What do you mean?" Jackson explained, his eyes lighting up with purpose. "We're going to start a music program for kids here. You'll teach them guitar. We'll give them a chance to find a better path, a place where they belong." Tommy shook his head in disbelief. "You want me to do that? I don't know if I deserve—" "You don't need to deserve it," Jackson said firmly. "What you need to do is use the rest of your life to create something good out of your mistakes. This is your chance, and this community's chance." Tommy sat silent for a moment before nodding resolutely. "If this is a way to make things right, then I'll do it." Weeks later, the first music program officially launched at the Lincoln Heights Community Center. A small but welcoming room was decorated with colorful artwork by local children. Donated guitars, old but lovingly polished, were neatly arranged on racks, ready for the first group of students. Jackson stood quietly in a corner, watching as Tommy guided a group of teens through their first lesson. Initially hesitant, the kids soon became enthusiastic as Tommy patiently showed each one how to hold the guitar, press the strings, and produce their first notes. The room echoed with off-key sounds and mistakes, but the joy on their faces was unmistakable. One boy, Elliot, struggled repeatedly to play a simple chord. Tommy knelt beside him, gently adjusting his fingers. "Don't rush," he said, his deep voice steady and warm. "Take it slow. Music isn't about playing perfectly, it's about feeling it." Outside, Evelyn Carter, a respected community leader, watched through the window. She stepped inside, her smile radiant as she observed the lively, inspiring atmosphere. "Jackson, this is incredible," she said, giving his shoulder a reassuring pat. "This is exactly what our community needs." The music program quickly became a cornerstone of Lincoln Heights, drawing children from all corners of the neighborhood. Each session was not only a place to learn new skills, but also a haven of connection and encouragement. Tommy, once buried under the weight of guilt, had transformed into a dedicated mentor. He laughed more, spoke more, and his eyes lit up with pride as he watched his students grow. One boy, after successfully playing his first song, hugged Tommy tightly and said, "Thank you. I didn't think I could do this." Standing quietly in the back, Jackson felt a peace he had never known before. He realized that forgiveness had not only freed him, but had also opened a new path for Tommy and the community. Morning sunlight bathed Lincoln Heights in a radiant glow, heralding a day filled with hope and renewal. At the community center, the music room had become a beloved haven for teenagers from the neighborhood. The space buzzed with the imperfect strumming of guitars, but it was filled with laughter and joy. Tommy Jenkins, now a dedicated teacher, stood at the center, patiently guiding his students through each lesson. Elliot, the boy who once struggled with simple chords, now completed an entire short song. His face lit up with pride as he asked, "Mr. Tommy, did I play it right?" Tommy nodded, gently patting his shoulder. "Not only did you play it right, but you also felt the music. You did great." Around them, other kids were focused on their guitars, some chuckling when a wrong note created a jarring sound. Tommy laughed along with them, his voice steady and encouraging. "That's the sound of a beginner. Don't worry. Everyone goes through this stage." Outside the room, a mother stood by the window, wiping away tears as she watched her son practice. "He's never been this patient before," she whispered to Evelyn Carter, who stood beside her. Evelyn smiled warmly. "Music has a way of changing people. Look at them, they're not just learning how to play. They're learning patience, teamwork, and confidence." Beyond music, other community activities were taking shape. Jackson Carter and Marcus Reed had organized a youth basketball tournament, revitalizing an old court with contributions from residents. On the day of the tournament, the court buzzed with energy, echoing with cheers and applause. Jackson stood at the sidelines, watching the games unfold. A group of parents approached him, their faces full of gratitude. "Thank you, Officer Carter," one woman said. "Our kids now have a place to play and make friends. It means so much to us." Marcus clapped Jackson on the back. "You've done good, Jackson. This isn't just about a tournament. It's about building trust in this community." During the games, Jackson marveled at how teens once known for disciplinary issues now collaborated with teammates, laughed, and pushed themselves to succeed. It was a beautiful transformation he hadn't thought possible for Lincoln Heights. Jackson also began making house visits to better understand the struggles residents faced. During one visit to Mrs. Johnson, an elderly woman living alone, he brought a bag of groceries. As he stepped into her small kitchen, she smiled kindly. "Thank you, officer. It's been a long time since anyone stopped by just to check on me. You remind me of your father. He was always so thoughtful." Her words brought a lump to Jackson's throat. He realized his role wasn't just about law enforcement, but also about continuing his father's legacy of kindness and dedication. The music program continued to thrive, attracting more young participants each week. One afternoon, a boy named Malik ran up to Jackson holding an old guitar. "Officer Carter, can you listen to me play? I just learned this song." Jackson smiled, sitting beside him. "Go ahead. I'd love to hear it." As Malik strummed, the simple melody carried a raw but heartfelt emotion. When he finished, Jackson clapped and said, "You did great, Malik. I'm proud of you." The program's impact soon became evident. Youth violence in the area decreased significantly, and the community center became a hub for connection and growth. At a community meeting, Evelyn Carter addressed the crowd. "Thanks to this program, Lincoln Heights has changed. Our children have a safe place to grow, and we've rebuilt trust between our community and the police." The room erupted in applause. Jackson, seated at the back, felt a quiet pride swell within him. He knew this was only the beginning, but their achievements proved the power of compassion and unity. The next day, the Lincoln Heights Community Center hosted a special event. Chairs were arranged neatly, and the hall buzzed with anticipation. Familiar faces filled the room. Children from Tommy's guitar lessons, their parents, and local business owners who had supported the community projects. All had gathered for a significant moment in Jackson Carter's journey. As the room quieted, Evelyn Carter stepped onto the stage. Her smile was warm, her gaze sweeping the audience before settling on Jackson, who sat in the front row, his uniform crisp and neat. "Today, we come together to honor someone who has not only worked to uphold order, but has also built bridges between our police force and our community," Evelyn began, her voice resonant. "Officer Jackson Carter has helped transform Lincoln Heights, not just in numbers, but in the hearts of every one of us." The crowd erupted in applause. Jackson bowed his head slightly, trying to steady himself under the weight of so many grateful gazes. The warmth of their recognition filled him, though he knew the journey had not been easy. As the applause subsided, Olivia Harrison, Jackson's former captain, took the stage. Her appearance surprised the room. In a sharp suit, Olivia walked toward Jackson with a proud smile. "Jackson," Olivia began, her voice firm yet full of emotion, "when I decided to send you to Lincoln Heights, I wasn't sure if you could change. But today, you've shown that not only can change happen, but it can ripple outward to inspire others." She handed Jackson a new badge, signifying his promotion to Community Liaison Officer. As Jackson accepted it, a wave of emotion washed over him. This badge wasn't just a symbol of his role, it was a testament to his transformation from a man of bias to a man of understanding and dedication. Stepping to the podium, Jackson looked out at the sea of familiar faces. Evelyn smiled encouragingly, Marcus nodded from the officers' row, and Tommy stood at the back, his eyes brimming with pride. "Over a year ago," Jackson began, his voice steady but heartfelt, "I came to Lincoln Heights with prejudices I didn't even realize I carried. I thought I understood what it meant to be a police officer. But the people here taught me that true strength isn't in authority. It's in empathy." He paused, his eyes sweeping the crowd. "I've learned that building a community means listening, learning, and sometimes changing ourselves first." The room fell silent as Jackson shared his journey. He spoke of the lessons Tommy Jenkins had taught him, the man he once hated but who had become his teacher in forgiveness. He talked about the children who had found purpose and joy through music. After his speech, Jackson stepped down and was greeted by a standing ovation. Evelyn Carter approached him and clasped his hand. "You haven't just changed yourself. You've changed all of us. Thank you, Jackson." An elderly woman approached next, gripping his hand tightly. "You gave my son a second chance. He says he wants to be like you. I can't thank you enough." Marcus joined him, clapping him firmly on the back. "You proved you could do it. But this is just the beginning, Jackson." At the back of the room, Tommy Jenkins stood holding his guitar. When their eyes met, Tommy walked over and shook Jackson's hand. "You gave me a chance to make things right. I'll never forget that. The event concluded on a hopeful note. As Jackson stepped outside, he saw children playing on the basketball court and Tommy sitting on his usual bench, strumming a gentle tune. Olivia stood beside Jackson, her sharp gaze softening with pride. You've done well, Jackson. But don't stop here. This new role is your chance to make an even bigger impact, not just in Lincoln Heights. Jackson nodded, his eyes firm with resolve. I won't stop, Olivia. This is only the beginning. Under the glow of the setting sun, Jackson felt a profound clarity. He had not only found his purpose in his work, but also rediscovered himself in the harmony of justice, compassion, and community. One day, the gentle morning sunlight filtered through the dense foliage of Oakwood Cemetery, casting a serene glow over the peaceful setting. Leaves quivered in the soft breeze, producing a sound like nature's whisper. Jackson Carter led the way, walking slowly along the gravel path. Behind him, Tommy Jenkins followed silently, carrying his old guitar, a symbol of the heavy memories he bore. As they neared the gravestone, Jackson stopped, his gaze settling on the carved words etched into the cool stone. David Carter, beloved husband, father, and protector of justice. Simple words that encapsulated an entire life, a legacy left behind by Jackson's father. Tommy hesitated as he approached, his eyes shifting from Jackson to the gravestone. The guitar in his hands trembled slightly as the wind brushed past it. The air seemed heavier, and every step Tommy took resonated with the pain of a past he couldn't escape. He knelt before the grave, his trembling hand resting on the cool stone. His voice broke the silence, heavy with the weight of 2 decades of regret. Mr. Carter, Tommy began, his voice shaken, I don't even know where to start. For 20 years I've lived with the guilt of what I did. That day, I committed an unforgivable act. I took your life and shattered your families. His words faltered as he bowed his head low. Tears fell freely, mingling with the morning dew on the grass. I was wrong. But I swear, from this day forward, I will live to do what's right. I will live in a way that allows you to rest in peace. Jackson stood silently, watching Tommy kneel at his father's grave. Memories of his father came rushing back. His father, smiling in his police uniform, fixing a broken bicycle for a young Jackson while saying, Son, being a cop isn't just about catching bad guys. It's about helping people find their way back to the right path. A good officer doesn't just enforce the law, he inspires trust in justice. Jackson also remembered another night when his father came home late, exhausted but with a fire of determination in his eyes. Jackson had asked, Why do you help people who don't deserve it, Dad? Aren't you afraid they'll just do bad things again? His father had sat down, placing a steady hand on Jackson's shoulder, and replied, No one is beyond a second chance. Sometimes the ones who seem most lost need our help the most. If we give up on them, who will help them change? Those words now echoed in Jackson's mind, a guiding light amidst the turmoil. He knelt, placing a bouquet of white flowers at the base of the grave, and whispered, Dad, I think I finally understand. Rising, Jackson placed a steady hand on Tommy's shoulder and helped him to his feet. His eyes, no longer cold or tense, were filled with determination and understanding. Tommy, Jackson began, my father always believed that justice wasn't just about punishment. It was also about forgiveness and second chances. I think he would accept your apology. Tommy looked up, tears glistening in his eyes, now tinged with relief. Thank you, Jackson. This means more to me than I could ever express. Jackson nodded. But an apology isn't the end. It's the beginning. Now we have to keep building on what my father believed in. This community needs people willing to act for its good. Tommy stepped back, placing his guitar on his knee, and began to strum a soft melody. The gentle tune floated through the quiet cemetery, a prayer of sorts, a way for Tommy to express his remorse and gratitude to David Carter. Jackson closed his eyes, letting the music wash over him. The melody carried with it the memory of his father, a strong, kind man who always believed in the power of forgiveness. When the song ended, Tommy stood, his expression lighter, as though a burden had been lifted. "You gave me a chance, Jackson," Tommy said. "I won't let you down." Jackson offered a faint smile. "We're not doing this for me or you. We're doing this for my father in Lincoln Heights." As they left the cemetery, Jackson glanced back at his father's gravestone. A soft breeze swept past, like a gentle reassurance from the past. He knew in his heart that his father would be proud. They walked along the gravel path, two men from different generations and histories, now united in purpose, a shared journey toward justice and forgiveness. "Tommy," Jackson said as they exited the gates, "let's start today. Lincoln Heights needs us." Tommy nodded, his eyes alight with hope. "I won't hold back anymore, Jackson. Let's do this right." Under the brilliant sunlight, their shadows stretched long on the path back to Lincoln Heights, where a new chapter awaited. The late afternoon in Lincoln Heights glowed with the golden hues of sunset, spreading warmth over the bustling streets. The central square was adorned with colorful banners and twinkling lights. Laughter and chatter mingled with the sounds of preparations for the biggest celebration of the year. Jackson Carter stood at the edge of the square, taking in the lively atmosphere. Children laughed as they tossed balloons into the sky, while parents busily arranged tables laden with traditional dishes. In the distance, Tommy Jenkins guided a group of teenagers, checking their guitars for a special performance. The loudspeaker announced the start of the event. Evelyn Carter, the respected community leader, stepped onto the stage with a radiant smile. She welcomed everyone, celebrating the unity of the community and giving special thanks to Jackson Carter and Tommy Jenkins for their contributions. Amid thunderous applause, Jackson took the stage. "Thank you, everyone," he said. "Lincoln Heights hasn't just changed. It's changed me. This community has shown me that unity and forgiveness can make the extraordinary possible." As the lights dimmed, Tommy and his group of teens performed a song they had composed, a piece full of emotion and hope. Jackson stepped back, watching the teenagers who had once been on the verge of losing their way, now smiling and immersed in their music. When the song ended, the square erupted in cheers and applause. The young performers beamed with pride, while Jackson mingled with the crowd, receiving heartfelt thanks from parents and residents. One mother, her eyes brimming with tears, told him how her son had transformed thanks to the music program. Tommy approached Jackson and asked, "What do you think?" "Proud," Jackson replied, looking around at the festive scene. "We've brought hope, Tommy." As the celebration wound down, Jackson stood quietly against a tree, watching the laughter and joy ripple through the crowd. His father's words echoed in his mind. True strength isn't found in power, but in the ability to build trust and inspire change. Jackson smiled with quiet satisfaction. His journey was far from over, but he knew he was on the right path. Under the soft glow of the moonlight, he turned to walk home, carrying a profound and unwavering belief in the promise of the future. This story is not just about transformation, but a reminder of the incredible power of compassion and forgiveness to heal and inspire positive change. What do you think of Jackson's decision to forgive and the changes it brought to his life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story meaningful, Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales. Thank you for watching.